man. YouTube, what up? Shout out to the YouTube world. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone is staying safe. Out here in the six, you know, we gotta stay indoors. Don't break quarantine. Don't be like those people copying those people in the States. Trying to be mad about they can't get their hair done. Half of them look like bees nests out here looking crazy and shit. But look, you know, it's funny looking at the world in its current state. I think it's become clear that this pandemic has pulled back the curtain on a lot of things. Governments openly not trusting each other. The financial system is not as strong as everyone thought it was. And that this whole world is really held together by this illusionary glue. And you know what? It was bound to break apart because anything that's rooted in falsehood eventually will fall apart. And you know what? That sounds crazy, but it's a good thing. It's time to start analyzing what's manufactured and is being presented as reality and what isn't. And that got me to thinking back to the last video, Fear is the Path, when I talked about all the issues with xenophobia and everything. It started really making me start thinking about race and all that craziness that was happening in China and still happening in China and even in other parts of the world now. This whole idea that someone is dark or has, high content of melanin, the thing that makes someone darker or more brown than another person. That has always been from ancient times aligned with mystery and evil, this darkness, this evilness, religions predominantly thought the absence of light was this bad thing. And because the sun is our sustainer, that really pushed this narrative, even though it's BS, because really religion and most religions are based around sun worship, even in its phases where it doesn't look like it's the case, with Jesus or with the sun around his head and, and all the other concepts, when you pray and you say amen, amen, even in the term amen, amen is an Egyptian deity, right? That's not a Hebrew word. Amen in itself is Egyptian. It's falsely called Egypt, really Kemet. So these things, these stories, these ideas, darkness isn't bad in all cultures. So in Egypt, falsely called Egypt, but better known as, or should be known as Kemet, there was a deity by the name of Kek. Now, he was the concept of darkness, or for simplistic terms, night. And if you actually read the story of Kek, you would see a lot of the story of Genesis from the Bible in it. Because just how in the Bible where the earth was covered in water and God's spirit moved along the face of the deep, Kek was also the watery mass of directionless chaos before land appeared. This story is over 3,000 years old, long before the Bible was written. Right? So when the people were trying to explain the concept of darkness or blackness, this wasn't an evil perception, but one attempting to describe the universe and the world before creation. Now, why do I bring that up? Because when you're talking about how this relates to actual people, depending on who wants to benefit how darkness is described, you then realize what the agenda is. Genetic, societal, and economic circumstances has and will always impact how one views their genetic community. And for the people outside of that community, they would then have to create a system how to deal with these perceptions if they're looking to control that group. Just remember that for a second, okay? So let's just deal with the most glaring question. And this question obviously has impacted the world tremendously. Why did Caucasians call themselves white? And Everyone else, non-white, were put into categories like black, yellow, or Asiatic, whatever term you want to call. Well, to be blunt, it's called mind fucking yourself. So, in order to justify one's actions, that what they're doing is right and exact, and I'm talking about anyone or any genetic community that practices racism, these are the key elements of racism that probably don't usually get explained in this way. But in order to justify those actions, you must create context and rules inside of the system that is allowing you to control that group you're trying to oppress. So as long as you have that physical control, that psychological dominance over that group, you've won. And you can continue to oppress that group in that system. That is the business of racism. So because slavery is a business, is and was still a business, it's about economics and resources. That's what it's always been about. That is the crux of it. Racism is the underbelly of it. It's about money. So as as time goes on, like I said in my last video, people sip their own cultural Kool-Aid. And they begin believing in their own cultural and societal lie due to the dominance over those other races. You have to understand, much of Europe was broke after the 100-year war during the 13 and 1400s. They were broke. Their coffers were empty. And they needed to be filled. So in order for that to take place, they need labor, free labor, to make that happen. But of course, if I enslave you, and I do it maliciously, malevolently, I'm not going to let you get back on your feet. Caucasians terrorized Native Americans, blacks, melanated people, for hundreds of years. Did you really think that they were going to go back to desolation? Did you really think that they were going to let you be on the same equal footing as them after doing what they're doing back then and now? Did you think that they would let all that suffering and anger go uncontrolled after freeing 4 million slaves? Of course not. So what will happen then is, especially, and now we're talking about things like the American slave trade. They supposedly freed the slaves, but then have Jim Crow and oppress melanated people further. Then when you couldn't find work and you turned to crime to survive, they create prisons to throw melanated people in to get more free labor. And then they create an industry out of that and then trade on the stock market. It's called the prison industry complex. Don't believe me? Go look it up. And there's no coincidence why the majority of people in prison are melanated. That's not a coincidence. Then you have redlining in specific parts of America. And even provinces in Canada did this in the 1930s and 1950s, preventing people from getting mortgages. And that's basically when a government targets a specific group of people to deny them a specific services. Creating food deserts, stopping you from being able to invest in certain neighborhoods, not creating strong infrastructure in poor neighborhoods where melanated and poor, even poor whites live. But the thing is, there were people that came along and tried to reignite that pride inside of melanated people. People like Marcus Garvey. But he was betrayed by his own people because of the spell of ignorance. because of this belief that we have it good. And this is not just a quote unquote black problem, because this is found in multiple different countries throughout the history of the world. India with the caste system, with the Brahmins, and the way the untouchables, the Dravidians, and how these people were treated. The Caribbean with the skin bleaching issues in Jamaica, and this idea that being white is better than having dark skin. And in South America, when the Portuguese were selective breeding lighter skinned people and reducing the genetic print mark of dark skinned people that they were having children with. All these things, all these actions had and continue to have a negative impact on these groups. And because of all this psychological trauma of not being able to love yourself, not being able to appreciate the skin you're in, being mistreated, being killed, hung, shot, many people who have been disconnected from their natural true culture as children of that culture, 400, 500 years removed, they find themselves being still mismanaged to this day. And they openly self-sabotage their own communities, robbing each other, shooting each other. And because of their indoctrination into these societal norms and concepts that don't apply to them. You cannot obtain true mental and economic freedom by living by the ideas and idioms of another group of people. It's not possible. Even the term African is Latin. It means to divide. It means to divide. That's what they did to the continent. They carved it up. But when we're trying to connect, we'll use it for simplicity purposes. Fine, you want to use those terms, but it's really about the interpersonal relations that are more important. How we connect as people, how we deal with each other from all the different diasporas. Jamaica, Nigeria, Ghana, all the melanated, anywhere there's melanated people. And when I say melanin, I mean people who have melanin. The ones who are being mistreated. So when other countries do this to melanated people, it's because you don't have a cultural code of ethics. And this is where, I might start hurting some people's feelings, because this needs to be said. Melanated people don't look out for each other. The leaders don't. The government doesn't in a lot of these countries. They're easily bribed by outside influencers looking to control because of money and resources. Other people within other genetic communities with disagreeable intentions, they know this. They know that there is a disconnect between a lot of these different groups. And they will exploit that. Do you think a country would mess around or even attempt to destabilize melanated Africans that was unified with the Caribbean, the Western Hemisphere, the African Hemisphere, with shared economic, military might and cultural connections? There's no way that would happen. There's no way. Africa is the biggest continent on this planet. It has the most resources, and it basically feeds the world in a lot of different ways. The cell phones we love, the chocolate we love, the diamonds that women go crazy for. Where do you think that comes from? And how many people die over these things? But the problem is, you see, many melanated people, they don't see themselves as African. And to a certain extent, if you're not from the continent, I can understand that. because you might not be doing necessarily exactly what someone from Chad might be doing or someone from Ghana might be doing. But to pretend like you don't have any connections because you're on the other side of the waters over there in Canada or in America or wherever, that's foolish. How do you ignore that? Knowledge of oneself means you cannot be manipulated by fleeting things like country titles of I'm Jamaican, you're Nigerian, or you're Indian and I'm from Bangladesh, or these things don't make any sense. You can't be corrupted by these trivial things. Things like money. You can't be bamboozled by someone trying to sell how you sell yourself down the road for things that are not even real. Money's not even real. It's backed by nothing. All this cash that people flash on Instagram and flash in their videos, it's nothing. It can be worthless in an instant. So the people who need an underclass, such as melanated people, they love when we bicker. Put up fight videos on World Star and Instagram. Participate in these dumb reality TV shows. Fight with other communities. They love it because chaos is the first order of creating control. And nothing does that more than manipulating somebody with another illusion like money. So when you have no understanding of the system you're in, you will get swayed by the media. Miseducation by the education system. Misorientation of over-aggressive cultural rules. And the blinding light of what the idea of race is. Because it's not real. You think the spending of billions of dollars to make people who are melanated, Indian people, Latino people, Black people, you think all this money that is spent by these cosmetic companies and all these other people to make us look like someone other than ourselves is an accident? That's not an accident. That is a psychological trap to lessen yourself so you can fall in line with the societal rules that require you to move ahead in it. Humans are creatures of habit. If I ingrain in you that white is right and darkness is bad and force feed this to you via violence, via culture, via entertainment, are you wondering why there's racism? So I think it's time that we become very careful in terms of the way we use these structured, societally accepted terms, because a lot of them are just rooted in falsehoods. They don't have any real value. And I think they need to be replaced. And I know that they're not going to be replaced by the status quo because they need these things to be in place to continually drive home a certain type of ideology into the minds of society. I choose not to do that. And I will not do that. I don't classify myself as a black man because I'm not. I don't follow these terms. These terms are nonsensical. They're idiotic. And it's one of the main reasons why, I think that I've had many conversations with people who come around to seeing my point of view later on after actually thinking about what the word is, how the word is used, how it's used in everyday speech, what that means for you as a person. If your child is growing up in the world who's melanated, and every time they hear something in terms of black, it's something negative, the child then looks at themselves and goes, well, mommy, daddy, I'm black. Does this mean I'm bad? Well, you'll tell your child no. But how does she reconcile that when she goes out into the world and that's all she still sees after you tell her something different? There's confusion. And then society begins to mistreat her. Remember the whole test with the doll?
Which doll is the black doll? And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll? And why is that doll pretty?
Because she's white and she has 2 eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
Which doll looks most like you?
Like me.
Yeah, which one looks like you?
And that one,
Okay.
that doll.
And what the melanated babies picked in terms of what they thought was beautiful, what they thought was ugly, where do you think that came from? It comes from the definitions that they are being imposed on, or that is actually imposed on them. That's where it comes from. So people can go on about whatever they want, but these terms are just manufactured and they create nothing but suffering. And this disconnection from what is actually real is part of the spell of ignorance. Blacks, quote unquote, you're on an island socially and economically inside of a system that is designed to define you in non-positive ways. You can't fight that unless you replace it with something real. Like, we really need to start thinking about these things. We got to start using our minds here. Like, for example, what is the justification of using the N-word? And look, I've heard the arguments, we're taking back the power in the word and, now it's cool to use and, it was bad back then, but because now it's socially accepted. Yeah. So now it's okay for you to degrade yourself because you think you've taken back the power in the word. Look, let's just be blunt again. You don't have any power as a group. You don't. It's the same reason why when a white person calls you that word, you get offended. And don't tell me about the ER versus the A on the end. It doesn't matter. If a white man calls you the N-word with the A on the end, you'll still get mad. That's because you don't have any control over how you are perceived. You don't have any control over it. Go ahead and call a white man a cracker and tell me what happens. Tell me what their reaction is. They'll just look at you like, huh? What? Make note, when white people are called these terms, these things bounce off of them because socially, economically, they're not impacted by these terms. Melanated people are still impacted by the way these terms are used. Therefore, intellectually, there should have been some growth to understand that this word should not be used. You can't take back power from something if you don't have power. You're not in the economic, social position to do so. The intelligent thing is to stop using the word. It still proves that you're trapped in a slave mind state. That's what it shows. And it shows that there hasn't been any learning or any growth over the past 400 plus years that you were in slavery. With all the history and all the knowledge of how the word is used, you still unintelligently use the word and then try to justify. You see the spell? The same way the white people use the term to justify, or use the term black to justify their imprisonment of it, in terms of imprisoning you in a certain type of system, blacks now use the same type of ideology that was imposed on them to justify the use of a negative word. Do you see the spell? This is why you have to move past these ideologies. You got to step outside of it. Look at it for what it is and stop doing it. Because it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's so abundantly clear that this word needs to stop being used. It's so evident that this word has not helped the progression of any black or melanated cause. It hasn't helped made people understand, no matter how many pseudo-intellectuals try to explain away why the word should be used, or why white people can't use the word, and why, quote unquote, black people can. This is all part of a systemic trap to keep you in a certain level of thinking. Because if I say all blacks behave this way, all white people behave this way, all brown people behave this way, and all yellow people behave this way, what happens is we have stereotypes, we have biases, and all these things spread, and there's an expectation that these groups are going to behave this way because they are labeled these titles, instead of dealing with the actual group of people, the culture, the things that make them tick, how to understand how these things take place. It's easier to throw everyone into a group and say, this is them. That's false. That's nonsense. Again, I don't see any other group doing this. Did it ever occur to people? And anyone who's ever been to a sports game, tell me I'm wrong when I say this, because I've been to many sports games, particularly football, and I've been to basketball games. I've been to football games in the States, and I've been to basketball games. Did it ever occur to people why people who are melanated, who are on the court, and I'll use basketball, who are on the court, can call each other the N-word, can call each other all type of vaginal orifices, they can call themselves all type of different stuff. But if you use a homosexual slur, you get fined.
That's right. No, I didn't grab him. You jumped into me. Shut up. Man, when it comes to shooting the ball, he's working on his technique, getting the ball a little bit higher, and there's Martin. Trash, nigga. You pass without looking. It's driving Kevin crazy right now. Give me that shit. Shit out of here, nigga.
He's yelling at Benny, and we might want to take the camera off him right now for the children watching.
So calling another person the N-word is not unsportsmanlike conduct? Really? You think that's a mistake? You think that's not on purpose? That is part of the system to allow melanated people to degrade themselves. That is part of the mechanism that keeps you downtrodden, even though you think because you're making millions of dollars and, you know, I'm on the court and I'm a star. You're not a star in the eyes of the people who you actually make money for. You're their cash cow. But as soon as you offend someone who has more economic power than you, then all of a sudden you need to kowtow. So look, man, in closing, man, I just want to get this off my chest and clear this. And just understand, no one wins the race in racism. No one wins it. Because if you are going to hold on to old world ideologies and not be a free thinker and stay trapped in isms, stay trapped in biases, stay trapped in stereotypes, the world's never going to progress. There's always going to end up being war. There's always going to end up being some over-aggressive competition. There's always going to be over-culturalism. There's always going to be tension between different groups. Just because we're different doesn't mean that we can't work together. But don't get it twisted. This is not a kumbaya call out. You disrespect me. I don't care what community you're from. You disrespect me, there's going to be a problem. I don't care what community it is. Whether it's my community, whether it's the white or the quote unquote Caucasian community, I don't care what community you're from. Respect of another person's humanity comes first. Like I tell people before, you can sip your cultural Kool-Aid all you want. I don't care about that. When you deal with me as an individual, as a man, as a person. All the other stuff, keep to yourself. We need a world of free thinkers, not a world of mental slaves. So look, man, let me know what your comments are below. I'm gonna get out of here. If you like the video, definitely like, share, and subscribe. And again, leave your comments. Let me know what you think about the topic, how we can do better, or if you have any topics you want to talk about, you want me to talk about, leave in the comments, man. We can definitely break bread on that. But I'm out. Peace in the shadows.